What's up, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is your boy Rob Clark, and this is the Lone Gunman Podcast. So first off, let me just apologize for my springtime hiatus and thank the many well-wishers who are out there checking on me. Just know that all is well, and that, sometimes your boy just needs to take a little break. But one thing I did not take a break on is Quick Hits, a show that I do with Doug Campbell of the Dallas Action, and you can check it out wherever you listen to this show. Just search for Quick Hits. So be checking that out. This week, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a spider web of a story that spans the decades of time and has many, many tendrils and tentacles reaching out from it. Many connections will allegedly be made. Many questions will supposedly be answered. But it's up to you whether or not you believe the story of Colonel Al Carone. Now, to help us along with this story, we have a couple affidavits, some signed, notarized statements, some court documents, and a little help from some relatives. So, those of you who are not familiar with the story of Al Carone will be very interested to hear this tale. Now, to help us out with our story, we're going to read the sworn testimony given in the state of New Mexico, county of Bernalillo, and notarized on April the 28th of 1999. And this comes from a lady by the name of Desiree Ferdinand. That's Desiree Carone Ferdinand. My father was Colonel Albert V. Carone. He was in the United States Army. MI-SIG. That's military intelligence. He died on January the 7th, 1990 in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Official death was uremic poisoning brought on by kidney failure. However, medical records state chemical toxicity of unknown etiology. He was buried at Santa Fe National Cemetery with an honor guard and a 21-gun salute, and yet until recently, the military has denied his very existence. When researching my father's career to obtain his life insurance policies through the government and to see what happened with my father's pension, I came up with some very disturbing information. Number 1, bank accounts were wiped clean, including accounts that were in both my father's and my name. Number 2, insurance policies that were given to his attorney had disappeared. 3, no record of my father ever having a social security number. Yet here it is, a 067-16-1826, and then resurfacing with 3 different birth dates. Number 4, no driver's license for the states of New York or New Mexico on file. Number 5, half of his medical records are missing, including 4 different stays at 2 hospitals were not on any official record. Number 6, no records until recently of my father ever being with NYPD. 7, no military records at one point. Then the military decided that he was in for 17 years, 9 months, and a day. There's a problem with this, as my father was in World War II with the OSS and was still active in 1985. Military records were destroyed in a fire in St. Louis. Only one paper survived stating that my father was neither with SIG nor officer material, and that he was denied any reserve duty. Number 9. People that knew Albert Carone disclaim any knowledge of him. Now, in 1966, my father started crossover work with the CIA through his military and intelligence connections. CIA disclaims any knowledge of him. My father had 3 separate passports. One is maroon, one is black, and one is navy blue. His maroon-colored passport was under the name of Albert Rogers. The black passport and blue were under the name of Albert V. Carone. The State Department says there is no such passport, yet I hold it in my possession. Number A634432, issued March 13th, 1980, with an expiration date of March the 12th, 1985. A new application was filed on January the 30th, 1985. Between 84 and 85, my father went to Mexico with a man by the name of James Strauss. When Dad came back from this trip, he was gone approximately 2 weeks, there was a big change in him. He stated he was not long for this world because the black suits would be coming for him, and that he could not do this type of work any longer. He stated that he was in Chapatula, Mexico, and that the company, including himself, destroyed an entire village of men, women, and children. Also at this time, a close friend of his, Kiki Camarena, was killed along with another DEA agent. Somehow these 2 missions were related. He stated that he no longer had the stomach for this, and that he wanted out. He stated that the black suits would come for him. I do not remember how many months later it was, maybe 4 months. Dad asked me to pick up a prescription for him at the pharmacy. He stated he was having a meeting with a man at KARB by the name of Michael Harari, so could I run these errands. It was mid-afternoon of the same day when I went to pick up my dad's prescription when I noticed that a man was following me around the pharmacy. When the prescription was ready, they called my father's name, and I noticed that this man was still following me. When I left the store, this man called me by my name and said, "Aren't you Al Carone's daughter?" I said, "Yes." He took a hold of my arm and told me to tell him about myself and stated, "We need to talk to you." At this point, I started yelling at this man to let go of me. People were looking, and my mother-in-law jumped out of my car and started yelling to get his hands off me. He dropped my arm and got into a 1985 Gran Torino, gold, tan, and color. I immediately went to my father's home and told him of the incident. My father's first words were, "What the hell do they want with you?" I asked who he was talking about. My father never answered my question. 4 years later, I identified a man in a picture as the man who I had had the confrontation with, and it was Michael Harari. The same evening of said incident, my father was brought to a Presbyterian hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with severe stomach pains. They could not identify the problem. First, they thought he had a severe food poisoning or a bleeding ulcer, yet neither one was the case. He stayed in the hospital for 2 days as he had severe pain and vomiting and was released. When Dad returned from the hospital, he told me that we needed to discuss certain things that he felt were important that I should know at that time. He told me to start keeping notes on certain people that he told me about because he knew he was not long for this world. And what he couldn't finish in his lifetime, he wanted finished in his death. He stated that if anything went wrong after his death, to start looking into certain people and places. He stated that he had his logbooks, journals, diaries, and tapes. He stated that these were his insurance tickets if anything went wrong because he was known in NYPD as a bagman and a paymaster for the CIA. He was the go-between for a lot of drug trafficking that took place from the years of 63 through 85. My father had many mafia ties. They are as follows: Frank Thierry, Vito Genovese, Joe Colombo Sr., Joe Pickles Persilia, Benny Eggs, Matty the Horse, Joe Gallo, Santos Traficante, Sam Giancana, Paul Castellano, Inspector Jack Lustig, Inspector Vince Nardiello, Commissioner Henry Curran, these are all NYPD guys, Bob Lucci, Prince of the City. My father worked out of the 81st Precinct and also in Chinatown and Little Italy. Dad was a close ally and friend of the mayor of Chinatown, Shavy Lee, Papa Lee. He also owned a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown. The other places frequented were Forlini's Italian restaurant and Lundy's Seafood. Dad took over the position of bagman for the police department from a man by the name of Jimmy Reardon. My father's government ties were to the following: Colonel Oliver North, also known as John Cappy, Frank Nugent, Michael Hand, Donald Beasley, General Edwin Black, George Ferris, General Leroy Minor, Walter McDonald, Brian Alexander, Raphael Chichi Quintero, Harry Wainwright, Paul Hellawell, Murray Riley, Elliot Abrams, General Richard Stilwell, Gene Howard, Spiro Agnew, George Teasdale, Bill Casey. This man visited our home in Wantagh, New York. He lived in Locust Valley, and he came to my father's home for my son's baptism and was very good friends with my father. Robert Vesco, connection in the Bahamas, Nassau, and the Cayman Islands. My father stated he was involved on a project in South America with the setting up of runways with certain types of beacons. This was done so that planes coming in from the CIA or going out with drug shipments would not and could not be detected. He worked with a man by the name of Colonel Ed Cutolio on this matter, and he stated that the logbook would show who the payment went to in this matter. Payments involving Mina, drug running, and a cartel run by a man named Pablo Escobar would also be in this logbook. His journals contained information of certain forts in the New England area, one particular in the state of Massachusetts that was involved in drug running. Also Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York, Fort Drum, also a military base in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and one Hawaii. He stated that monies were laundered through certain banks and that a main drop-off for laundering their drug money was the St. George Hotel in London, England. They also used places in the Cayman Islands and Miami, Florida. Banks mentioned were Republic National Bank, Fifth Avenue, New York, account CI Ltd, Ansbacher, reference Woodbridge, contact D. Hughes. Concordia Federal, account number 8-0254451, Advance Bank. NetWest Bank, New York and London, Bank of Zurich. I'm guessing that's Switzerland. In 86 and 87, my father stated that he needed to make things right some way. He talked about a green beret that he called Sandy due to his color of hair. He stated this kid was framed because he knew too much concerning the drug running and about these runways in Latin America. He stated that he participated in this mission, and Colonel Cutolio's name was brought up again. He stated that he had worked with this kid on a mission called Sandman. Nothing more was said other than he was going to see if it could be made right because this fellow was framed. After Dad's death on January the 7th, 1990, I started looking into these people that my dad had mentioned to me. I called a man by the name of Victor Marchetti who had worked for the CIA. He stated that he did not know my father, but he told me to call a man by the name of David McMichael. I contacted Mr. McMichael, who stated that he could not help either, but told me to call a man by the name of Bill McCoy. Mr. McCoy wound up having many conversations with my father, especially when I brought up an operation by the name of Amadeus. In these conversations with Mr. McCoy, he asked me if I ever heard of a man by the name of Bill Tyree, who spoke about an operation known as Watchtower. I had not. As time passed, Mr. McCoy put Bill Tyree and myself in communication with one another. I sent Bill a picture of my father, and he identified him as Colonel Carone, for whom he had worked on different occasions, one being an operation called Sandman. At this time, Bill did not know that Colonel Carone was my father. He also stated that he was known by the name Sandy. I am totally convinced that Bill Tyree and Sandy are one and the same person, and that he is who my father spoke about when he discussed the kid in the green berets from Massachusetts who was framed because of what and who he knew. This government and military deal in drugs. They have for many years. I know this due to the many talks my dad and I had after he realized he was dying, and there was no help for him. Why did he decide to talk to me? I really can't say, other than I think he was trying to clear his mind and soul and make peace with his maker. I want to know how a government can take a man and totally make his insurance policies, military records, police department files, etc. disappear. I would also like to know whose truth the CIA and military go by. The motto of the CIA is, "Yet all ye men know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." How high is the price a family must pay for the black operations in this government and for the people that do their bidding? Sincerely, Desiree Carone Ferdinand, Corrales, New Mexico. So, there you have a little preview and a little painting of who this man Albert Carone was and what he did. He was allegedly with military intelligence for over 35, 40 years. Had connections with the CIA from the mid-60s up through the 80s. Was in on lots of drug deals on behalf of the government. He was a bag man for the NYPD. All kinds of stuff. So you might be asking yourself, well, Rob, why in the hell are you talking about this on a JFK-related podcast? I promise we'll get there. Really, I do. I promise. Now, in her notarized testimony there, she spoke of a man named Bill Tyree, otherwise known as Sandy, who worked with her father, Albert Carone. So let's get into the affidavit of William Bill M. Tyree. I, William M. Tyree, a.k.a. Sandy, on oath having been duly sworn, say and depose the following. That I am currently incarcerated within the Massachusetts Department of Corrections, serving my 19th year of a first-degree murder life sentence. That I am prior service, and my last duty assignment was the 441st Military Intelligence Detachment, 10th Special Forces Group, Airborne SFGA from Fort Devens, Massachusetts, the Green Berets. That during the periods of time that I was on active duty within the U.S. Army, I did know and I did serve with the individual known as U.S. Army Colonel Albert V. Carone, who was a military intelligence counterintelligence officer. That I did work with Colonel Carone on a variety of classified military operations that the U.S. Army and U.S. government does currently deny ever taking place. That I was told many things by Colonel Carone prior to his death in 1990, and the following things are some of the bits of information that Colonel Carone communicated to me. Carone said he had taken money to a female named Ruth Payne in late 56 on orders of a friend of his named William Casey, who would later be associated with the CIA. Carone knew William Casey through his connections to the Gambino and Genovese crime families, in which Carone was a made man and worked as a New York City detective bagman, delivering payoffs from the Mafia to the various New York City police officers who were on the take and received payoffs. Carone said that Ruth Payne was approached by the CIA through William Casey to find and recruit individuals with communist ties and some type of anti-American backgrounds. Here we go. Carone said that Ruth Payne undertook the CIA offer due to her Russian-speaking background and interest, her pro-American stance, and the fact that Michael Payne and another relative of Ruth Payne worked for AID, which was used as a CIA asset. Carone said that there were at least 3 individuals in the immediate area where Ruth Payne lived and worked. All 3 individuals fit the profile cited above the paragraph 5C. Carone said that by dropping 3 individuals into the area and then approaching Ruth Payne to find and recruit one of the 3, that there was additional distance between the CIA and the individual and Ruth Payne. He said the CIA wanted it that way. Carone said when Ruth Payne found one of the three individuals, she would in turn notify her CIA contact, who was identified to me as George de Mohrenschildt, who in turn would contact his CIA supervisor, identified to me as George Bush, who was connected to Zapata Business. Carone said that George Bush of Zapata Business was the same George Bush who was CIA director and later vice president and then president of the United States. Carone said that the individual located by Ruth Payne was named Lee Harvey Oswald. Carone said that Ruth Payne was unaware of what Lee Harvey Oswald was to be used for. Carone said that at the time that Lee Harvey Oswald was recruited, it was not for any planned assassination. He was merely part of a controlled experiment conducted by CIA doctors. Carone said that his brother, Dr. Pasquale Pat Carone, was involved in the controlled experiments conducted by the CIA. Carone said that Dr. Pat Carone worked with another doctor identified as James P. Cattell in the CIA-controlled experiments. Carone said that Dr. Carone and Cattell both worked in the CIA experiments known as MK Naomi and MK Ultra. Carone said that one of the books outlining what Dr. Carone and Cattell did was entitled Operation Mind Control, authored by W. H. Boart, New York Dell Publishing Company, 1978. Carone said that proof of the involvement of Ruth Payne and George de Mohrenschildt in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy is through their testimony to the so-called Warren Commission investigating the murder of JFK. In their testimony before the Warren Commission, both Ruth Payne and George de Mohrenschildt testified that they did not know Lee Harvey Oswald. Yet in documents found by Michael Levy in the mid-70s, the U.S. Department of the Navy had received inquiries from Ruth Payne concerning Oswald in the late 50s, 57 or 58, around there. Carone said that for Ruth Payne to make inquiries about Lee Harvey Oswald in 57 and 58 was consistent with two facts. One, Ruth Payne had found Oswald after being recruited to do so by Carone in late 56 at the behest of William Casey. Number two, Ruth Payne had to have been working for someone in 57 and 58, as there is no other reason why Ruth Payne would make inquiries about Oswald and later lie about that fact to the Warren Commission. Carone said that in order to see the involvement of George Bush in the Ruth Payne-George de Mohrenschildt puzzle, all you had to do was look at the FBI report dated 11/23/63 by FBI agent W.T. Forsyth, in which Bush and a Captain William Edwards visited J. Edgar Hoover in the week after JFK was murdered to learn what progress the FBI had made. Carone said this was done by George Bush to learn if the FBI had uncovered the Ruth Payne-George de Mohrenschildt connection to George Bush. Carone said that to further show the conspiracy and need of George Bush to remain out of the picture and not be connected to either Ruth Payne or George de Mohrenschildt, that all you have to do is get the transcript from the U.S. Congress when George Bush was sworn in or being considered for the position of CIA director. At that hearing, George Bush basically stated he had no connection to the CIA. Yet the FBI report dated 11/23/63 clearly states that a Mr. George Bush of the CIA met with FBI Director Hoover. That Colonel Carone went into some detail concerning the CIA control experiments that Lee Harvey Oswald was recruited for. Carone said, atmospheric electromagnetic activity such as sunspots or gravitational stresses which distort the Earth's magnetic field can create varying external electromagnetic conditions during which human beings are more or less disposed to the consideration of new ideas. This activity, which can be produced by man, can create a new thought pattern in the mind of someone who may have always been against the idea, or it could be used to increase existing thought patterns, turning the person into a guided robot. Carone said that a leading CIA doctor, Dr. L.J. Ravitz, had studied this activity in great detail, and it could be used to stir up a new idea or enforce existing ideas. Carone said to find a publication identified as Journal of American Society of Psychosomatic Dentistry and Medicine, Volume 17, Number 4, 1970, article entitled Electromagnetic Field Monitoring of Changing State Function, Including Hypnotic States. B. Ionization of the air with negative condensation nuclei makes the person drowsy and depressed, and places the person in a good position to receive a new idea, or in a good position to increase an existing idea. And Carone cited a publication to me entitled The Ion Effect, author E.P. Dutton, New York, 1977. Extremely low frequency waves, up to 100 hertz, are used to create physiological disorders and emotional distortion. Infrared sound vibration up to 20 hertz can subliminally influence brain activity to align itself to delta, theta, alpha, or beta wave patterns, which generally makes the person subjected to this type of infrared sound inclined towards anything from alertness to passivity. Infrasound can be broadcast over a great distance, and even broadcast to an unsuspecting person through a radio broadcast. Colonel Carone cited a publication to me from Playfair, authors Guy L. and Scott Hill, The Cycles of Heaven, New York's St. Martin Press, 1978. That Carone said by the time the CIA had finished with Lee Harvey Oswald, the experiments would have made him capable of anything. That Carone told me that in 1963 he had been ordered to shoot JFK at the Dallas airport in Texas. Carone said he had been given a bolt-action rifle, Russian-made, with a telescopic lens, but could not get a clear field of fire at JFK, and therefore didn't want to upset the apple cart by taking a shot that might miss, and alert everyone that an attempt had been made on the life of JFK. That, Carone said, he had went to Dallas in '63 on orders from William Casey, that he had been joined there by several other U.S. military personnel, all of whom had some part in the overall operation to kill JFK. Carone said that he had worked in Dallas with several anti-Castro freedom fighters, as well as a couple of guys from the Mafia. That, Carone said, he had approached Jack Ruby prior to the murder of JFK, and Ruby was aware of what was going to happen and was part of the overall plan to murder JFK and silence the patsy. That Carone stated to me that over the years he had confided his involvement in the murder of JFK to several people. Carone said Vice President Lyndon Johnson was also involved in the murder of JFK, and the CIA had evidence on LBJ that related to a murder in Texas prior to the time that LBJ was in national politics. That I will testify to the contents of this affidavit in a court of law. In late 1997, I did receive the attached pages of a book entitled Destiny Betrayed, JFK, Cuba, and the Garrison Case. This book at the footnotes does outline the issue of Ruth Paine and George de Mohrenschildt and does corroborate some of what Colonel Carone told me, and is offered for that reason. Signed under the pains and penalties of perjury on this date, William M. Tyree, and notarized. Now, he mentions the endnotes from Jim DiEugenio's book, Destiny Betrayed, which states this: the Paines, like most of the Marxist, in quotes, Oswald's friends, were members of Dallas's rabidly anti-communist white Russian community. The faction had ties to both the Tolstoy Foundation and the Russian Orthodox Church, which were both backed by the CIA. From Phil Melanson's book, page 79, Michael Paine's brother was employed by AID, the Agency for International Development, an organization with extensive CIA links. Ruth Paine's father was a retired AID employee. and from Melton's book, page 80, on November 23rd, in a phone conversation with his, quote, estranged wife, Michael Payne stated that although he felt sure Oswald had shot Kennedy, he did not feel that Oswald was responsible. He then added, "We both know who is responsible." And this quote is from Anthony Summers, page 132, 133 of Conspiracy. There are two more provocative Ruth Payne statements. At her Warren Commission appearance, she said that when she first heard about the assassination on television, she immediately told Marina that it occurred right outside the depository where Lee worked. Yet she thought he worked at the warehouse, which is blocks away from Dealey Plaza. And this is cited Warren Commission Testimony, Volume 1, page 74, Volume 3, page 36. Finally, although she and George de Mohrenschildt testified that she had met Oswald in 1963, researcher Michael Levy has unearthed a Navy Department document which reports that Ruth Payne had begun requesting information about the family of Lee Harvey Oswald in 1957. Now that, folks, is interesting. And I believe we've talked about it on this show before, how we've heard rumblings that maybe Ruth Payne had reached out to Oswald through a Quaker pen pal program, or it may have been for this agency for international development, the AID program, to which she had obvious ties. You know, it wasn't like this guy was plucked out of obscurity from nowhere for no reason. You know, we know that basically after George de Mohrenschildt had left for Haiti, that he had basically, not necessarily, but kind of handed over the Oswalds to be cared for, watched, babysit by Ruth Payne, Michael Payne. And that Ruth Payne was a constant in the Oswald's life from that time until the assassination occurred. And in that meantime, probably was a bug in Marina's ear to try and drive a wedge in between Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina. Not that she may have needed much prodding to do so, but, you know, nonetheless, a snide comment here, a remark there, you know, commenting on Oswald's behavior and treatment of Marina and the kids, you know, surely didn't help the relationship get along too well. So, you know, as we know, you know, they spent a lot of time apart, you know, this summer and the fall of 1963 due to certain factors of what was going on at the time. So that's interesting. Now, all this stuff about George Bush and all this other nonsense, you know, we know, of course, de Mohrenschildt did write a letter to his buddy, George Bush, when he was a CIA director, asking him for help. You know, they're trying to get these House Select Committee investigators off his ass, to no avail, and which possibly led to his, quote, suicide by shotgun blast to the face. You know, I mean, we're in speculation land now, folks. And a lot of this is hearsay from a clearly incarcerated former military intelligence Green Beret named William Tyree. Secondhand information. But of course, you have that corroborating testimony from Albert Carone's daughter, who does present some very eye-opening anomalies when it comes to her father's jobs and connections and life, and clear patterns of how, if anyone could make anybody's records disappear, it would certainly be the CIA for sure. Clearly, Mr. Tyree has done some reading while being incarcerated from his last 19 years. Obviously, he's read Destiny Betrayed and various other Kennedy assassination related books. Because he's pulling in George Bush, he knows about the document, the FBI document, the one that was found in the late 80s, or surfaced in the late 80s, supposedly tying George Bush to the CIA. So he knows about all this stuff. Now, whether or not he's trying to put two and two together here and weave a fantastical tale that may help him out of his life sentence a little bit, or give him a little bit of gravitas and relative freedom of leverage with his so-called knowledge of information that he deems to be very important to know. So he gets out the old leverage stick and decides to sue in November of 1999 the Department of the U.S. Army, the Clerk's Office of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia has submitted 3 documents for my review. Having reviewed the attached 3 documents, the court enters the following sealing order. Wherefore, it is the 8th day of November, 1999, hereby ordered that until further order of the court, the document marked top secret shall be filed under seal. The other 2 documents, a letter from the plaintiff, William Tyree, and an affidavit from Raymond Coleman, shall not be filed under seal. So what does the affidavit of Raymond Coleman say? Let's see here. I, Raymond Coleman, on oath state the following to the best of my recollection, belief, and knowledge. That the attached document that purports to be the declaration of William Casey is authentic. When this document came into my possession, I was told by Desiree Carone Ferdinand of Corrales, New Mexico, that she had spoken to Ted Shackley, a former Associate Deputy Director of Operations at the Central Intelligence Agency, to immediately send the document to the FBI and to the General Counsel of the CIA, which I did. That was done over 100 days ago, and I never received any form of response from any of these agencies. I am aware of the contents of the Casey Declaration and can state at this time most of the contents of that document can be proven, and I will testify to the contents of this affidavit in court, signed under the pains and penalties of perjury, on this date, August 27th, 1999, Raymond D. Coleman, Esquire, Attleboro, Massachusetts. Now, here's where it gets juicy, folks. We have on letterhead from the Director of Central Intelligence, Washington, D.C., declaration marked top secret. I, William J. Casey, declare, I have found that freedom is a priceless commodity that demands constant vigilance to guarantee its longevity. I was assigned to the Office of Strategic Services in London, England during World War II. During that time, I befriended a young German soldier named Gunther. I used Gunther and several other anti-Nazi German prisoners of war on OSS operations within Nazi Germany. I knew this violated Geneva Convention. I did not care. The Geneva Convention was but a set of rules governing man's atrocities committed in the name of political ideology. To wage war with rules is to prolong human suffering. Open warfare is the last resort of a civilized nation and must be used sparingly. Wars must be fought savagely, utilizing all tools and tricks at hand. And Gunther was a tool. Ignoring the Geneva Convention was the trick. After I became director of the CIA on January 28, 1981, I was approached and befriended by William Colby, a former DCI. My history with Bill Colby is known. Colby notified me off the record of 2 operations he was still running in Latin America. Both operations were without knowledge and consent of the United States Congress. President Ronald Reagan and even the United States intelligence apparatus Colby identified the operations as A6, Red Mist, and A7, Project Sandman. A7 entailed smaller operations. I was told that A6 identified individuals in the buildup of the communist threat in Latin America. Some intelligence collected in A6 was used in Task Force 157. I was told that A7 was the Phoenix program of Latin America. It involved the assassination of the communist infrastructure throughout Latin America. I was told that Colby authorized assets involved in A6 and A7 to engage in narcotics trafficking to finance both operations. Colby engaged in a similar operation that I know of in Vietnam for the same reason. Colby candidly informed me that he had propositioned more than 1 million pounds of cocaine in Panama between December 1st, 75 and April 1st, 76. This was done with the aid of our gallant ally, General Manuel Noriega. The cocaine was transported into El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Honduras between 76 and 81. Colby now sat in front of me with hat in hand and requested my help in the delivery of the cocaine to the American market. I was told that Colby was using a mutual friend of ours, Colonel Albert Vincent Carone, U.S. Army Military Intelligence, to field A6 and A7. Al Carone is a charismatic patriot that General Joseph Stilwell introduced me to in late 1945. Beside the usual qualifications, Al Carone brought to the anti-communist effort a direct connection to his longtime friend Vito Genovese. Genovese was the head of the gambling and narcotics for the controlling mafia family in New York, to which Al Carone was a made member. Carone is a friend of international fugitive Robert Vesco. Carone has several anti-communist intelligence sources that include Marita Lorenz, a friend of Fidel Castro. Al Carone is the younger brother of Dr. Pasquale Pat Carone of the CIA. Dr. Carone worked for Central Intelligence on other matters as well. Colby taught me that profits from the preposition cocaine would be laundered through Al Carone, the New York Mafia, and Robert Vesco, then redirected to the anti-communist effort through Colby. After discussions with Al Carone, I made the decision to bring the preposition cocaine into Mena Airport, Mena, Arkansas. Central Intelligence has used Mena Airport on prior occasions. This time the cocaine is the tool, and the trick was to ignore the law and avoid public scrutiny. And we were helped in our effort by Governor William J. Clinton and William F. Wild. By 1984, all preposition cocaine had arrived at Mena Airport, and additional cocaine sources were secured. Cocaine was being transshipped through Hangar 4 and 5 at Ilopango Air Base, El Salvador. My point man at Mena was Adler Barry Seal. Bill Clinton has proved invaluable so far by containing the local law enforcement investigation into the intelligence activity at Mena. Bill Weld, as Assistant United States Attorney, was placed in charge of the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice. This was done so that Bill Weld could control investigations into Mena by federal law enforcement agencies. This placement of Weld has proved invaluable to date. I ordered John Poindexter, Robert McFarland, and Oliver North to go outside the normal channels and use available assets, including the Mafia, to ensure the arrival of the cocaine into Mina Airport. The arrivals occurred in no small part through the efforts of personnel assigned to the NSA and Army Security Agency, ASA. The men and women of the NSA and ASA blindly early warning defense satellites and radar grids to enable the aircraft to land undetected at Mina. The NSA and ASA operations were Sea Spray and Jade Bridge. I have learned that the course of the democratic struggle for Nicaragua and Latin America is beginning to swing in our direction. I attribute this success to A6 and A7, which Bill Colby had the insight, precision, and spine to carry out. I take notice of the heroic efforts of Al Carone, Bill Clinton, Bill Weld, John Poindexter, Bud McFarland, and Ollie North. Without these men, A6 and A7 would not have appeared. Freedom is a priceless commodity. The amount of freedom you enjoy is a result of the amount of vigilance you invest. My actions may be recorded as criminal, condemning countless Americans to drug dependency. I don't care. All wars produce casualties. Generally, the more violent the war, the shorter the length. My choice was either to stare down a protracted Cold War guerrilla insurgency in Latin America, or use the means available to finance and wage a violent war of short duration for democracy. I stand by my decision. The tool is cocaine. The trick is to understand that the drug user had the freedom to make a choice and that they chose the drug. I chose to use their habit to finance the democracy that all Americans enjoy. To keep those Americans safe from the communist threat knocking on our back door in Latin America. For a change, the drug user will actually contribute to society. I declare under penalty of perjury that the above facts are true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief, executed this 9th day of December 1986 in McLean, Virginia. Signed, William Casey. So, while it would be great if that declaration of William Casey was true, and certainly if a lot of elements of it ring true, when you get to the last page and you see where he signed it at the bottom, it does look like his signature. It has a witness signature right below. A man you may have heard of before. A man by the name of Richard Milhouse Nixon. So Nixon is Casey's witness to this statement where he just puts on blast everything that the CIA had been involved in Latin America and the drug running and the financing of the wars there, just to go all out. Now, all this stuff was brought up in various lawsuits, depositions, and the like. And even up until 2012, most recently, William Tyree decided to sue Elizabeth Heffernan, who ran the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center, the SBCC, in Massachusetts, where he is incarcerated. On April the 16th of 2012, William M. Tyree, who is incarcerated at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center, filed a petition of writ of habeas corpus under 28 U.S.C. 2241, Tyree claimed that the conditions of confinement at SBCC were so poor that they affected the fact or length of his confinement. In a memorandum and order dated June 27, 2012, the court denied the petition on the ground that Tyree's allegations about the conditions did not provide a basis for habeas relief. Before the court are Tyree's motion for reconsideration, motion for a show cause order, and affidavit in support of these motions. In these documents, Tyree reiterates his argument about the conditions of his confinement at SBCC affect the duration of his requirement. Tyree alleges that due to prison violence caused by overcrowding, SBCC has recently been on lockdown on more than one occasion. During these periods of lockdown, rehabilitative programs which allow prisoners to earn good time credit have not been available. According to Tyree, the recent lockdown showed that a relationship between the conditions of confinement and the duration of confinement is not speculative. However, Tyree's motions do not cure the problems of his original petition. Although improved prison conditions may lead to the opportunity to earn good time credit, Tyree's claims lie outside of the core of habeas corpus because success on his claims would not necessarily spell a speedier release. Even if the alleged conditions of which Tyree complains were ameliorated, he would not necessarily earn good time credits. Therefore, any such involvement or any such improvement would not necessarily shorten the period of his incarceration. Tyree does not have a right to earn good time credits. Massachusetts law unambiguously grants the Commissioner of Corrections complete discretion to award good time credits for participation in prison rehabilitative programs. For those reasons, and the reasons stated in the memorandum order of June 27, 2012, the motions for reconsideration and for a show cause order are denied. It is so ordered by Denise Casper, United States District Judge. So, I'm not sure about the fate of Mr. William Tyree, but, if everything that I've just told you guys about rings with a little bit of truth and a little bit of spice, just to spice it up a little bit here and there. Things are certainly very interesting. And, we've known, and Oliver North has talked about it since then, about what the government and Bill Clinton was up to down there in Mena, Arkansas, with the cocaine and Barry Seal flying it in. I mean, do you think we went down there and got Manuel Noriega for no reason? Panama? Who cares about Panama? It's all about the cocaine, people. And funding black operations, just like they did in Vietnam, and just like they did before that in World War II. Armies have always raped and pillaged gold and treasures and coinage and money and antiquities and drugs to fund their own wars, even the ones off the books. And what about the connections between Ruth Paine and the Aid Foundation and George de Mohrenschildt and Lee Harvey Oswald? Very interesting stuff. Very, very, very interesting. Anyway, folks, that's it for me this time. Until next time, this is your boy. Peace.